Okay, I don't know how long this is going to be, but I'm going to try to get at least one post for Volume 20 out. Prologue. This is Norbert. I have just returned. The Archducal couple will be here soon. Melchior listened eagerly to the announcement from his father's head attendant, unable to keep his blue eyes, which he had gotten from his mother, from sparkling with excitement. His older brother and sisters were at the Royal Academy over the winter, and his parents were busy socializing, so no one came to visit him in his room. He barely met with anyone except his retainers, and was feeling rather lonely as a result. Lord Melchior, Sergeant, said with a smile, the Archducal couple is due to relax here while their luggage from the Royal Academy is put away. Recall what you have recently learned and welcome them as guests. He was Florencia's retainer at the moment, but he was also Melchior's tutor and planned to become his head attendant following the young boy's baptism. It seemed that Melchior would need to practice his socializing now. I'll do my best, Melchior replied with a nod, trying his very best to remember everything he had been taught. Melchior, we're back, Sylvester said. Father, Mother, welcome home. Allow me to take you to your seats, Melchior replied, greeting them with a half-excited, half-anxious smile. He hadn't seen his parents in days, so it was with a tense feeling in his chest that he guided them to where the tea was being prepared. I want to hear about the Royal Academy. How are my brother and sisters doing? Melchior quickly surrendered control of the conversation to his guests, as his tutor had taught him was proper. His parents returned warm smiles filled with love. It seemed they could sense his growth through the way he was tracing the steps of standard socializing. Well, how should we begin? Sylvester wondered aloud. There's just so much to talk about. Before you left, Ehrenfest, you were greatly concerned about socializing at the Interduchy tournament. Lord Melchior has shared in your worry ever since, Sir Durrett said while he poured some tea. His addition to the conversation was a deliberate effort to assist the young boy, who had subsequently realized he had spoken too vaguely. He had thus far been told to ask broad questions that were easier to answer, but the subtle look he was now receiving from his tutor made him realize that some direction was still needed. I see, Sylvester replied. We'll talk about our socializing at the Interduchy tournament then. Melchior's parents began talking about the events of the Interduchy tournament and graduation ceremony. Ehrenfest had received so many guests that the Archducal family had needed to divide themselves into teams to handle them, but even then the abundance of visitors from top-ranking duchies had made things a struggle. They also mentioned Ferdinand played Ditter against a knight from Dunkelfelger over Rosamund's manuscript, and the subsequent unexpected appearance of an unfamiliar Fabius, during which the apprentice knights were said to have acted with extraordinary coordination. Melchior listened intently, all the while his imagination racing from the tales of the wondrous place he had never visited. Wolfred and Charlotte handled the visitors from lower-ranking duchies, Sylvester continued. We even had the Archducal couple from Frembeltag as guests. Frembeltag is next to Ehrenfest, and this is where you and Sargerecht were born, right, Mother? Melchior asked, trying to picture the map in his head. The two of them smiled and nodded in response. Indeed, Florencia said, my elder brother and Sylvester's elder sister visited, it seems. This year, this graduation ceremony was apparently quite emotional for them, as your cousin, Rudiger, was among the graduating students. My cousin? You shall find out more about your family and other duchies after your baptism, but this is a good opportunity to get a head start, Florencia noted. She explained that they had family in both Frembeltag and Ahrensbach, and although the names were all still new to him, simply knowing that they shared his blood made him feel closer to them than he did to any of the nobles he had learned about for his baptism ceremony. Mother, why can I only learn about my family and other duchies after my baptism? Because you will not have any opportunities to meet them before then, Florencia explained. Melchior realized then just how small his world really was. He glanced at the door to his room, and it immediately occurred to him just how little he knew about everything beyond it. There was so much out of them for him to see and to learn from. Lady Florencia, how is Frembeltag? Have things calmed down somewhat? Sargerecht asked, sounding rather hesitant. He was one of the nobles who had fled to Ehrenfest when it became clear that Frembeltag was going to be on the losing side of the Civil War. But he still wanted to know about his birthplace. Melchior remembered him once saying that he wanted to tell those from Frembeltag that Ehrenfest was increasing its harvest by having Archduke candidates perform religious ceremonies. Wolfred and Charlotte spoke to them in our place, but according to their report, Rudiger traveled across their duchy performing spring prayer. Florencia continued. Their harvest improved as a result, and they have said that henceforth their archducal family will always take action to lead religious ceremonies. For young Lord Rudiger to be doing such a thing, children truly do grow shockingly fast, don't they? Sargerecht asked with a relieved sigh and a sentimental smile. Yep, they sure do, Sylvester replied with a chuckle. He then looked over at Melchior. How about you tell us how much you've grown? How have you been passing the time, Florencia added. Has your baptismal studies been going well? Melchior faltered. He was pretty sure he had finished everything he needed to do before his baptism ceremony, but he looked to Sargerecht for confirmation nonetheless. They have, Sarge Recker said with a nod and a smile. Yesterday, Lord Melkor studied the general flow of the ceremony and the proper way to walk through the Grand Hall. He already knows the names of all the important nobles who will greet him, and the other day he began studying geography so that he may assist with the religious ceremonies. Then I have a gift for our little hard worker, Sylvester said as he opened up a small box. Practice returning blessings before the baptism. This is your ring. You'll need some practice before you can shoot mana from it. I'll need you to need to take it back as that I can formally present it to you on the day but for now, hold out your hand. Such rings served as proof that one was a noble, and children received them from their parents after being baptized. Melkor observed that the face stone was green, matching the divine color of his birth, and after climbing down from his chair, he readily held out his hand. Sylvester slid the ring on his son's finger, and the band shrunk until it was a perfect fit. Melkor stroked it, feeling the bliss of having been accepted as a noble. Melkor, why not practice giving a return blessing, Florencia suggested. It is the same blessing as the one given when greeting someone of a higher status for the first time. All nobles must learn it. Focus energy in your left hand so as to guide the man to your ring. She proceeded to demonstrate, and a red light emerged from her ring. Melkor tensed his left hand, trying to imitate his mother, but his mana refused to move as he willed it, and the face stone in his ring shone only a small amount. The tool used to investigate mana capacities worked without issue, since it automatically drew from one's latent mana, but return blessings didn't seem so simple. I may not manage this before my baptism ceremony, Melkor mumbled nervously. Without thinking, Florencia gave a gentle smile and took Melkor's left hand in hers. I am fully certain you will master this. All you need is a little practice. Thankfully, this can very easily be done with another of the same blood, so allow me to take this opportunity. All of a sudden, Melkor felt an odd power seep from his mother's hand into his. It wasn't a vile sensation by any means, but it was rather uncomfortable, so he instinctively pushed the mana out again, and in that instant, a soft green light appeared from his ring. Ah, Melkor exclaimed. Do you now understand the feeling of mana moving through you? Florencia asked. A bit. Melkor looked down at his hand. He still found it strange that he could move something within his body by his own will, and he wasn't yet confident that it was something he could manage on his own. It was true that he had transported some of the mana in his palm to the ring, but only with a great deal of assistance from his mother, who had made it so he only had to reactively push at her mana. Wolfrid said that my sister Rosemund gave a blessing that filled the entire hall at her baptism ceremony, Melkor said. How much mana do I need to move to be able to do that? Charlotte told me that I should see Rosemund as a role model. Oh, no. Sylvester looked somewhat bemused for a moment, then waved a hand dismissively. Don't try to match Rosemund, after she's a special case. The thing is, she was giving blessings and helping with religious ceremonies in the temple as an apprentice shrine maiden before her baptism. Don't try to match her. But Charlotte said, listen to what your father says. Charlotte doesn't realize that you don't have the mana capacity like Rosemund does. Oh dear lord, hers is freaking out of this world. Melkor had received 2 pieces of conflicting advice. Perhaps this was his father's way of saying that he simply wasn't good enough? A wave of confusion washed over him, but it soon faded when he felt his mother's hand calmly stroke his hand. Sylvester does not mean to say that it is wrong to have Rosemund as a role model, Florencia said. He is simply concerned that you might overexert yourself when trying to control mana for the first time. It puts a great burden on your body when you cannot earn used to it. He then went on to explain that Wilfred and Charlotte had overdone it with their mana practice during Rosemund's 2-year slumber, hoping to fill the void that her unexpected absence had created. Melkor had already heard them both explain how amazing Rosemund was, and that they had worked so hard to catch up to her. But he had never heard about them making mistakes. It was new and very interesting information. So Wilfred and Charlotte mess up sometimes too. You need only to practice within your limits, Florencia concluded, and slowly increase your range of abilities from there. Yes, Mother. Melkor. Sylvester interjected, sounding curious. You've never met Rosemund before, but you sure seem to respect her, don't you? Melkor gazed up at his father quizzically. Charlotte comes to play with me the most, and she always tells me how incredible Rosemund is, and when Wolfrid comes, he always brings toys and picture books that Rosemund made. You and Mother talk about her sweets and recipes too, don't you? She also saved Frembeltag, which Sardrek was so worried about. In short, everyone praised Rosemund on such a regular basis that Melkor thought it was obvious that he should respect and idolize her. Also, I'm going to be supporting her and my brother, right? Melkor continued. He's the future Ab, and she's going to be his first wife. I want to be strong enough to protect them both. He would one day be playing a supporting role to the Archducal couple, filling in for them while they were absent, keeping an eye on duchy matters, and ensuring the nobles were organized. Essentially what Bonifacius was doing now. Your enthusiasm is wonderful, Melkor, but Rosemund's protection is best left to her guard knights, Florencia said. Sylvester nodded in agreement. The Archducal couple will have guard knights to keep them safe, but the same can't be said for other nobles. Wouldn't you find it cooler and manlier to protect a bunch of people at once? A bunch of people, Melkor repeated. He was unsure what his father meant and could only look at him in confusion. Father's being weird again. Right, Sylvester said. There was an attack during this year's award ceremony, where Rosamund was able to protect our duchy students with Shitsaria's shield. During this attack, unfamiliar fey beasts had appeared that could only be killed with black weapons. The arena had promptly been thrown into chaos, and it was only because of Rosamund that Ehrenfest had managed to come out unscathed. The divine instruments that Melkor had thought existed only in books were real, and she had effortlessly used them to protect the students. It was like a legendary story from the Bible, and just hearing it made him excited. Melkor rushed to grab his own picture book, Bible, opened it up to the page with the Goddess of Wind, and pointed to her shield. Father, is this the shield that Rosamund used? Sylvester shook his head and explained that Rosamund had made one that was even bigger, big enough to protect all the students. It had apparently been an amber hemisphere with a magic circle on it, and anyone who attacked it or had malicious intent was thrown back by an enormous gust of wind. Again, it was like a legend come to life, and Melkor's idolization of Rosamund only grew stronger. Father, can anyone make Shitsaria's shield? Nah, I reckon Rosamund and Ferdinand are the only ones. Ferdinand is more used to the Getult he was taught in the Royal Academy before entering the temple, but I've heard that he can make Shitsaria's shield when he focuses. So only Rosamund and Ferdinand, the High Bishop and the High Priest, respectfully, can make the shield. Melkor immediately drew a connection between working at the temple and receiving the divine instruments for the gods. The temple sure is amazing. Oh, he's getting a good opinion of the temple. Good. Father, I want to go to the temple too, Melkor announced. I want to learn to make the divine instruments. Lord Melkor, what are you saying? His attendant cried. Please calm down. Melkor reflected on his choice of words. Maybe he had spoken too crudely. He looked at his parents. Florencia was giving him a concerned smile, while Sylvester had an eyebrow raised in amusement. Father, Mother, can I have permission to go to the temple? Sure, Sylvester replied at once. You'll learn a lot from the experience. Melkor's attendants, however, continued to protest. Please reconsider, Ob Ehrenfest, they cried. They were at something of an impasse, and when a decision couldn't be reached concerning how to raise Melkor, it was down to Florencia to give the final verdict as his mother. All eyes fell on her. Sylvester, she said with a smile, you must not give your permission so willingly. Melkor was overcome with disappointment. He knew that his mother's opinion was stronger than his father's at times like this, but why do you, Sardrek and the others not like going to the temple, he said. Don't my siblings go there? Wilfred and Charlotte were Melkor's closest family members, and they had been participating in religious ceremonies since he was first gaining self-awareness. Rosamund and Ferdinand were also in the Archducal family, and they led the temple. Everyone praised them, so Melkor had to wonder why he wasn't allowed to go there. The Haldensdale miracle taught nobles the importance of religious ceremonies, and news of Frembeltag's improved harvest has probably spread that same message to other duchies as well, Sylvester said to Florencia. But most importantly, Melkor will one day be participating in these religious ceremonies too, once he learns to control his mana like Wilfred and Charlotte did. Right, Melkor replied. I'm going to help just like Wilfred and Charlotte. He was eagerly showed her the picture book again, but she just looked at him as though he were a rebellious child. It should be best for him to get used to the temple sooner rather than later, Sylvester argued. Giving him permission now shouldn't cause any problems. It's going to happen sooner or later either way. Sooner or later indeed, Florencia replied, but I stand very firm for the latter. Melkor will only trouble Rosamund and the others with his current mindset. That the temple is like a game of sorts. At the very least, we should not grant him permission until after he has learned to control his mana and recite prayers. It was reasoning that both Melkor and Sylvester could agree with. Melkor didn't want to get in anyone's way. He just wanted to join his siblings after being baptized. He wanted to be a useful member of the Archducal family like his sister Charlotte had always encouraged. I'll learn the prayers then, Melkor said. That's the spirit, Sylvester replied. I'm pretty sure Wilfred and Charlotte received a bunch of instructional boards from Ferdinand when they were learning them themselves. You can borrow those. Okay. Lady Florencia, are you certain about this? The attendants asked reproachfully. Melkor was still rejoicing at the news, as he failed to understand why they appeared to be so against it. Florencia looked over the attendants, then spoke in a calm tone. Lady Rosamund becoming the High Bishop, and Lord Ferdinand continuing to serve as the High Priest, even after his return to noble society, have led to the retainers visiting the temple on a daily basis. We are no longer in the past. The temple's reputation is gradually changing for the better. I imagine that you will not find it easy to change your perspective, but please try to accept this. Understood. Melkor didn't know what the temple had been like in the past, but he could tell from Florencia's words that Rosamund had caused this change for the better. I want to meet my sister Rosamund soon. I wonder, can I invite her to a tea party? Charlotte had spoken about having a tea party with Rosamund before being baptized. Maybe she would introduce him if asked. It was with this hope in mind that Melkor waited for his siblings to return, his heart filled with admiration. Oh, he's so cute! Melkor's so adorable! Why are all the kids so cute? One had to use a teleportation circle to get from the Royal Academy back to one's duchy. I squeezed my eyes shut as I tried to endure the nauseating swirling of the world around me. Welcome home, Rosamund, Bonifacius roared. My eyes were still closed, but hearing his familiar voice was enough to tell me I was back in Ehrenfest. Stop right there, father. Don't move, master. I opened my eyes to see Karsten and Angelica standing on either side of my grandfather, positively glowering at him as he tried to welcome me with a smile. I adopted a defensive stance on instinct, recalling the incident last year when Bonifacius had very nearly launched me through the ceiling in excitement. Yeah, he almost did. Stand aside, you lot, Bonifacius ordered. Why should I contain my love when my granddaughter had come first in class 2 years in a row? Because she will die otherwise, father, Karsten said. My guard knights agreed, and with everyone against him, Bonifacius ultimately slumped his shoulders in defeat. I appreciated that he was so eager to praise my achievements, but avoiding a split skull was a lot more important to me. Grandfather, open your hand, I said. He did as instructed, at which point I gripped his index and middle fingers. I would like to hold his hand properly, but my hands were nowhere near big enough. We can walk to my room like this. Now let's go all the way to the northern building together. Very well. Master, don't squeeze your hand no matter what, Angelica warned. If you do, Lady Rosamund's fingers might break right off, Daniel said. As the guard knights watched on fearfully, I completed the impressive task of getting all the way to the northern building while holding hands with Bonifacius. Oh, so cute! Index and middle finger. I'm guessing the finger that's next to the thumb and the one next to that, I'm assuming. Or maybe I'm thinking of the pointer finger. Maybe it's I don't know. It's one of I know what the middle finger is. May we meet again at dinner, I said to Bonifacius, seeing him off once we had arrived at my room. I then introduced my new retainer to those who had stayed at the castle during my term at the academy. This is Roderick, an apprentice scholar who gave me his name. He will be living in the night dorm as my retainer from this point on. Daniel, please take him there at once. I have discussed the matter with Ob Ehrenfest, so a room should already be prepared for him. Understood. Roderick, ask Hartman and Feline about your scholar work, I said. Everyone was going to be busy putting away their luggage from the Royal Academy, so my underage retainers will only begin their work in practice starting tomorrow. Tea is ready, Lady Rosamund, so might I suggest moving to the tea party room, Adelia said. Your siblings are there waiting for you. It seemed that she had prepared drinks for us and our attendants so that we could while away the time until our retainers finished putting away our luggage. And so Angelica and Adelie brought me to the main building's tea party room where I found Wilfrid and Charlotte already sipping tea. Melkor's room was prepared while we were at the Royal Academy, Wilfrid said. Children of the Archduke lived in the northern building from their baptism until the coming of age. Similarly to the Royal Academy's dormitories, the top floor was reserved for the girls and the one below for the boys. Wilfrid was glad to have Melkor there now, since he had previously been all alone. Charlotte nodded with a smile. Melkor did say that he wished to join us in the northern building as soon as possible. Apparently all the necessary preparations had been completed much earlier than usual. I was Melkor's adopted sister and wasn't related to him by blood, so I couldn't go to the room in the main building where he lived. The only times I saw him were when he was brought to the dining room to say his goodnights, but we never spoke or socialized. One thing I noticed about Melkor was how similar he was to Florencia, both in how he looked and acted. His hair was also the same purplish hue as Sylvester's, which made him look more like his father than Wilfrid did. That said, I couldn't see Melkor as being a mini Sylvester, as I remembered thinking about Wilfrid. It was strange. That reminds me, I said. Sylvester mentioned that Melkor's baptism is going to be held alongside the feast celebrating spring. That's right, Wilfrid replied. Melkor was born in spring. So was I, for that matter, and mine was done at the feast, too. I remember that grandmother actually... Oh, no. His nostalgic musings were cut short when he suddenly caught my eye. Hoping to break the awkward silence, I shifted the subject back to Melkor's baptism ceremony. I'm going to be blessing him as the High Bishop, much like how I blessed you at your baptism ceremony, Charlotte. Melkor will surely rejoice at that, Charlotte replied. Her smile gave me strength while I was on the stage. As we waited for our retainers to summon us, Charlotte told me all about how Melkor's room had been decorated. I truly couldn't wait to meet him. It had become normal that Ferdinand and Bonifacius to eat dinner with us on the day we returned to Ehrenfest. I was sitting beside Bonifacius as usual, and together we discussed the Interduchy tournament, the dinner game against Dunkelfelger, the attack on the awards ceremony, and Cornelius' sword dance. Thinking back, a lot had happened in such a short time. The apprentice knights asked you for a blessing even though black weapons are forbidden, Bonifacius asked, barely managing to contain his outrage. Did they intend to have their own Archduke candidate charged with the crime? It seems they've forgotten who they're supposed to protect. They may be getting better at dinner, but they clearly know nothing about being a knight. Then in an instant his expression turned gravely serious. Perhaps I should go to the introductory tournament next year instead of Ferdinand. Ferdinand scoffed. Now that is a suggestion I truly can't appreciate. Violence is not my forte. You liar! It absolutely is! He is. He's lying. Putting that aside, there were a lot of things that Ferdinand assisted with during the introductory tournament and graduation ceremony, so in truth, I wanted him to come next year as well. Good, that settles it then, Bonifacius said, nodding. I'm going next year. You'll be safe no matter what happens, Rosemine. But who will serve as Rosemine's doctor if you're not there, Uncle Wolfried asked, desperately trying to prevent the impending catastrophe. Sylvester nodded in grave agreement, and of course I shared their opinion. Nobody understood my health better than Ferdinand, and the introductory tournament was so busy that I needed someone to look after me and make sure I didn't violate any scary socializing rules, all that was presumably too much to suddenly lump on some Bonifacius. As I will no longer be attending the introductory tournament, Rosemine will need to lock you in the dormitory with Bonifacius, Ferdinand said. This is your fate, and you must accept it. Sylvester raised an eyebrow at this remark. Weren't you the one that said it would be a shame to make Rosemine give up on going to the introductory tournament? At such times, one must choose the lesser of two evils. Ferdinand had been acting strangely ever since his conversation with the Sovereign Knight Commander in the library. Out of nowhere, he had started trying to evade the Royal Academy entirely, as was abundantly clear in our conversation. Seriously, what does adolgist even mean? I was really curious, but with how on edge Ferdinand seemed, I could guess that it wasn't a subject I should broach so suddenly. For now, I needed to allow the whole affair to wash over me and simply keep an eye on him. Let us instead think of the upcoming spring prayer, I said. We can discuss the introductory tournament next year when it becomes relevant. By then, I might have even grown enough to be able to manage my health without Ferdinand. Impossible, Ferdinand said tersely. Are you being serious? I'm trying to be considerate here. Holding back the urge to growl at him, I continued talking about spring prayer. I needed to prepare for the lengthy journey it entailed and plan things out with Wilfred and Charlotte. Now was a convenient time for that since Ferdinand was here too. I asked Sylvester which new province had been chosen to join the printing industry and started planning who would go where with consideration for the Gutenbergs. Father, will Melchior be joining us for spring prayer? Wilfried asked. Nah, Sylvester replied, but he can't control his mana yet. I can't imagine he's going to be helping out until next year. My sudden absence after the kidnapping incident meant that Charlotte had needed to learn to control her mana, even over winter socializing, in preparation for spring prayer. Melchior wasn't under such time constraints, so we settled on him joining for the first time next year. By the way, did you find anything on how to make the stages for the spring prayer ceremonies? I asked Sylvester. Unfortunately not, he replied. I'll continue my research, but it won't be easy. Apparently Ferdinand was going to be taking a group of scholars to Haldensdale this year to research the magic circle and ceremonial stage. I must return to the temple, I said. I need my ceremonial clothes and other little things. Sylvester shook his head. You can leave that to your attendants. What do you think I've gotten your retainers permission to go to... Just why do you think I've given your retainers permission to go to the temple? I clapped my hands together in realization, having not considered that at all. It hadn't even crossed my mind that I could have leave temple matters to castle attendants. I plan to have Justice go to the temple so you may have an attendant of yours accompany him, Ferdinand said. I will contact Fran via magic letter and tell him to prepare. Thank you. Thoughts about the temple soon led to thoughts of the lower city, and with that in mind, Sylvester, when will the Plant and Company books be sold? I asked. Speak with Moritz and the attendants in the playroom to figure things out. Understood. I was also wondering, when will the mana compression lesson be? Charlotte is due to attend this year, and I have a new retainer. Have all the participants been decided yet? Yes, the invitation should have been sent out. I ensured that Roderick and Feline were added to the list of participants. Feline's contract needed to be changed from a duchy to a country one. So when do you plan to sell the information gathered at the Royal Academy to our offices? Sylvester asked. We want it done as soon as you're ready. I would appreciate having 2 days to plan with the scholars first. Consider it done. I'll contact the offices and send word once we settle on a date. Sylvester and I started constructing a general idea of what needed to be done while the nobles were still in the nobles' quarter. It was better for us to do all this in person, as conversing through letters would take far too much time, and we would no doubt miss the spring feast otherwise. Rosemine, Ferdinand said. I turned and saw his eyes were fixed on me, while his index finger rhythmically tapped against his temple. Have Wilfred and Charlotte accompany you when you are selling the intelligence gathered at the Royal Academy. Why? I asked. Planning to include them next year seemed reasonable enough, but their lack of involvement thus far meant they would only struggle to keep up, if they decided to join us any sooner. Ferdinand sighed. You made it clear from the very beginning that your only intention is to gather stories from the other duchies. No, it was just an accident that information from other duchies has started flowing in as well. However, that intelligence is of great value to our offices, and they are now awaited urgently. Selling it should not be done without Wolfrid present as the next Archduke. Wolfrid reacted to most of this news. His head shot up, indicating he was now on full alert. If the heads of the offices Ferdinand was talking about only saw me at the yearly meeting where information was sold, they would start placing more importance on me than any other Archduke candidate. Furthermore, as the contracts have been modified and the Archduke is leading the printing industry, it is now the business of the duchy to gather its stories to make into books, Ferdinand continued. This cannot be done on your budget alone. To me, it still seemed as though the printing industry existed primarily to suit my hobbies, but now there were official contracts, everything was being done on Ehrenfest's budget. You should also give some of your current workload to those serving Wilfrid and Charlotte, Ferdinand said. It is excellent how much your retainers have grown to keep up with the enormous burden you've increasingly brought upon yourself, but their superiority to other retainers is becoming more and more apparent. They're growing so much because you keep having them do work at the temple. As I protested on the inside, Ferdinand spoke again, this time in a hushed voice that only I could hear. You will be the first wife, not the Ob. Do not stand out so much. Apparently his intention here was to remind me that I needed to prop up Wilfrid rather than myself. I am gathering stories and progressing the printing industry because I want to, I said, so I wouldn't feel right about giving work to Wilfrid and Charlotte despite them not being my subordinates. Oh, but since you're the one who trained my retainers, perhaps you are suggesting I do the same and give their retainers tasks to complete? Although I'm pretty sure that isn't my job. How many times must I tell you not to bring more work upon yourself? They may train their own retainers. My point is that printing is not your job alone, and that you should take care to share important information. It seemed a little hypocritical for the secretive workaholic Ferdinand to be telling me to share my workload and my intelligence, but I couldn't deny that he was always propping up the Archduke. I went ahead and nodded, though although I wasn't entirely convinced. The next day, I summoned Charlotte, Wilfrid, and their retainers as instructed, then began outlining the information we had obtained at the Royal Academy. Charlotte, please handle these calculations. Wilfrid, please organize all this information into a single sheet. Having to teach everyone their new jobs didn't actually increase my workload since I needed to show the newbie Roderick what to do anyway. I ensured the information was ready to be sold to the offices while at the same time getting Feline to see how much ink and paper we had used so that she could calculate the total amount of money we had spent. I observed everyone's progress and saw that Wilfrid and Charlotte were staying up to date with their retainers while working alongside them. Things were progressing much slower than planned, though. It took 3 people trying their hardest, their brows furrowed in concentration, to manage what Hartmut could easily finish on his own. Just as Ferdinand said, my retainers are so much more skilled, but how exactly could we fix this? I couldn't think of a way to remedy the situation without getting involved myself. Once the information was organized and spread, I asked Wilfrid and Charlotte to attend the meetings with the higher-ups of the offices. We needed to make the intelligence look valuable, squeeze money out of our interested parties, and distribute the earnings to those who had provided the information in the first place. You managed all this last year when you had just been unwell for so long, Wilfrid asked, looking exasperated. I understand why Uncle wishes to reduce your workload, Charlotte added. You may rely on us a little bit more if you wish. I thank you ever so much, Charlotte. Her kind words brought a smile to my face. Wilfrid nodded in agreement with our sister. We're engaged, but I didn't know about any of this, he said. In the future, could you call me when you're talking about work with Father? Of course, I said. I will do so next time. After finishing the monocompression class, Roderick desperately started trying the process for himself, pushing through all the mana sickness-induced nausea he was no doubt feeling. It was during that time that his father requested a meeting with me since Roderick had yet to return home, and news about him becoming my retainer had spread through during winter socializing. Of course, I refused the request for a meeting. Sylvester would settle the matter instead. Thank you. Do I have time? Do I have time? Yes, I've got time. The Winter Playroom and Judith's younger brother. I shall be going to the Winter Playroom today, I said. I must advertise the planting company, and Riarda has instructed me to seek out potential retainers among the younger students. In that case, might I introduce my little sister? Brunhilde asked. Naturally, it's up to you to decide whether you would accept her, but considering her as an replacement apprentice arts attendant for when I graduate does seem wise. Brunhilde explained that she wanted to introduce her sister to me last year, but had decided against it since I wasn't even used to my own retainers at the time. However, as I socialized with both Greater Duchies and royalty at the Royal Academy, I absolutely needed at least one apprentice arch attendant there with me. Please do, I said. Lady Rosamund, can I introduce my little brother too, then? Judith asked, her violet eyes sparkling with anticipation. It reminded me that she was the oldest of all her siblings, and that she mentioned having to work hard for their sake. I gave her a nod, smiling. Upon our arrival at the playroom, both Brunhilde and Judith called over their siblings. An adorable little girl was the first to come over, and she cried out, "Sister," with the brightest smile. Lady Rosamund, allow me to introduce you, Brunhilde said. This is my little sister, Bertilde. Bertilde was like a mini Brunhilde. Bertilde was like a mini Brunhilde. The children in the playroom had all greeted me before, but it was hard to remember them when we interacted so rarely. My older sister often speaks of you, Lady Rosamund, Bertilde continued. I am glad that we finally have the opportunity to speak. Oh, shoot, I forgot about the clothes. My sister often speaks of you, Lady Rosamund, Bertilde continued. I am glad that we finally have this opportunity to talk. As soon as she had discussed fashion trends and such with Brunhilde from a very young age, and she envied her big sister for serving as my retainer and spreading her own trends. I wish to serve you as well when I go to the Royal Academy. You cannot serve Lady Rosamund without first earning Lady Elvira's approval, Brunhilde said, admonishingly. I cannot speak! Bertilde was going to be entering the Royal Academy 2 years from now, and she was currently serving Elvira as an extended family member. It was safe to say that Elvira was specifically training her to one day become my retainer. Bertilde? Okay. Name. Memorized. Lady Rosamund, this is my little brother Theodore, Judith said, leading her brother by the shoulders. He's going to be joining the Royal Academy next year. Let go of me, the boy complained. I can introduce myself. He had youthful features that made him resemble Judith, but he came across as especially mature for his age. I get the feeling that it was usually his job to keep his excitable older sister under control. Oh, so cute. They aren't similar in the slightest. Maybe they're complete opposites like Angelica and Lasletta? I am Theodore, the boy said, pleased to meet you. Cornelius nodded and then turned to me. Lady Rosamund, I think he will make for an excellent addition to your retinue. I've seen him train, Angelica added from where she was standing beside Cornelius. He's surprisingly strong. I am honored to receive your praise, Theodore said, flushing red with embarrassment. His violet eyes were filled with admiration as he gazed at Cornelius and Angelica. They were popular as Bonifacius' prized disciples, and many children aiming to be apprentice knights apparently looked up to them. Theodore, why don't you ever show me that kind of respect, Judith said, pouting. She must have felt we were stealing her little brother away from her. I could understand why that could bother her. The very thought of someone else becoming Charlotte's role model after all my hard work to become the best big sister broke my heart. I shall consider taking Theodore as a retainer when he enters the Royal Academy next year. I said the boy in question didn't seem very pleased about this news, however. He looked from Cornelius to Angelica to me, then hung his head with a concerned frown. Unfortunately, I cannot be your retainer, Lady Rosamund. What are you even saying, Theodore? Why would you turn down Lady Rosamund? Maybe it's because he's going with someone else? Judith asked, having likely never expected that answer. I raised a hand to stop her and smiled. Perhaps he has already made an agreement with Melkor, I said. You must not be overly controlling here, Judith. It's up to Theodore to decide whom he serves. Theodore shook his head. No, Lady Rosamund, it's not Lord Melkor whom I wish to serve, but the Gibe, as my father does. That is why I cannot become a guard knight for the Archducal family. He shrank into himself as he spoke, aware that it was unthinkable for someone to turn down such an opportunity. But his dream of one day becoming a knight like his father and serving the Gibe alongside him pulled at my heartstrings. It reminded me of when I had promised to protect the city and everyone in it, just like Dad. My affection for Theodore was already shooting up. What a splendid dream, I said. You have my support in full. May we compromise then, and have you be my retainer only while I'm attending the Royal Academy? Excuse me? Theodore asked. He wasn't the only one taken aback by my suggestion. All of my retainers widened their eyes as well. Theodore, you may serve me only while I am attending the Royal Academy, I said. You may guard me while studying and practicing to one day serve the Gibe. How does that sound to you? He offered no response, but I could sense his heart waver at the prospect of only working for me temporarily. Riarda tried to tell me to wait, but I gestured for her to wait and continued. I already have enough guards for when I am in Airfest. I only need more for the Royal Academy, so could you serve me only during that time? I will think about it, Theodore eventually replied with a small smile. It seems that you all need to be lectured, Riarda said, planting her feet firmly on the ground and glaring at us the moment we returned to my room. First, Judith, you must talk things over and make the necessary preparations before introducing family to Milady. Otherwise, you are causing trouble for both parties. Apparently, there was much that needed to be done before introducing someone as a potential retainer. You needed to confirm that the person being introduced was willing to serve, that they worked to a good standard, and that they were trustworthy enough, and in cases where they were underage, that their parents agreed to the arrangement. Brunhilde, in contrast to Judith, had followed these rules perfectly. She had introduced her sister to me as a potential retainer only after serving me for 1 year, observing Bertilda's progress under Elvira, confirming her wishes, and watching the spread of the printing industry in Groschel. It seems to me that you saw Brunhilde offer to introduce her sister to Lady Rosamund and simply joined in on the spot, Riarda continued. This lack of preparation will only cause problems, and as we saw, Theodore had no intention of serving anyone but the Geeb. Milady has said that she wishes to respect his wishes, so we will not be forcing him to be a retainer, but if you had done this with someone less considerate, his dreams would never have come true. Now in particular, there is a very limited number of children in the Royal Academy who are of the correct age to become a retainer. It would not be unusual for Theodore's wishes to be ignored, considering his lower status. I see now I didn't think my actions through enough, Judith muttered, looking totally defeated. My apologies. You need only do better next time, Riarda said, her harsh expression finally softening. It seemed that she was finally now finished with Judith as she turned to me, once again looking terrifying. How many times have I told you not to announce ideas you've come up with on the spot, milady? Now that you've made your suggestion to Theodore in front of all the other children, it cannot be taken back. You must carefully discuss these matters with Lord Sylvester and Ferdinand first. Riarda contacted my guardians by ordinance, and soon enough I was called to the Archduke's office. Boy. The first to speak was the one who looked the most serious, Ferdinand. Now then, Riarda tells me you wish to recruit someone as a temporary retainer or some such. Just what in the world are you thinking? Just so you know, I was trying to follow your example, Ferdinand. Elaborate, Ferdinand said, scrunching his brow in confusion. You bring only Eckert and Justice with you to the temple, and while in the castle you borrow scholars from Sylvester or elsewhere, no? Even during the Energy Tournament, while you had several knights in the Order pretending to guard you, they certainly weren't your retainers. Several guard knights had stood behind us while we had tea at the Energy Tournament, but I had only somewhat recognized their faces. They certainly hadn't been retainers Ferdinand used all the time, and indeed, when the Turnish-Befallen attack had occurred during the award ceremony, they had prioritized protecting the archducal couple. Only Eckert had accompanied Ferdinand to the grounds as his guard knight. As a member of the archducal family, surely you had many retainers back in your Royal Academy days, no? I asked. Where are they now? If you can employ their service only when you need them, I see no reason why I can't have retainers who work for me only at the Royal Academy. Sylvester said that I can't share retainers with Melkor, so I'm just attempting to learn from your example, Ferdinand. You and I are not the same. How so? To be honest, I just want enough retainers to keep up appearances at the Royal Academy. I plan to raise a few more key scholars, but I have enough people in my service already. My response wasn't met very favorably. Ferdinand grimaced, Karstead hung his head while muttering that I shouldn't adopt only their bad traits, and Riarda started rubbing her forehead. Sylvester, however, seemed unusually amused. He looked between all of us and then burst into laughter. Sounds good to me. She's doing exactly what you did, Ferdinand, and you know it. Maybe you should learn from her example and train some new retainers of your own. The majority of my retainers from back then were some of the former Veronica faction and are considered dangerous elements to the duchy, Ferdinand said plainly. My circumstances are not the same as yours, Rosamund, as you can pick freely from all those available. Not to mention there are few eccentrics who would willingly accompany me to the temple. That is true, because, not everybody sees the temple favorably. He is trying to say that we couldn't be compared, since I was guaranteed to leave the temple and become the Dweck's first wife through an engagement, while he was going to be the high priest now and forever. But I thought we were equally as limited in our options. You say I could choose anyone, Ferdinand, but there are almost no archnobles or men nobles who are the correct faction, attending school alongside me, and already taken by Wilfrid, Charlotte, or Melkor. Pray tell, who exactly do you expect me to pick? If you have any candidates in mind, I'm all ears. Thank you. She's kind of got a point here. If she's not allowed to pick from the former Veronica faction because of, all that stuff involving, with Roderick and the name-swearing thing, then if she can't pick those that are due to work with Wilfrid, Charlotte, or Melkor, she's kind of got not very many options here. Wilfrid and Charlotte had taken over leading the playroom during my 2-year slumber, so the archnoble children there had pretty much all ended up with one or the other, depending on their gender. The only ones who remained were those Florencia had identified and spoke to about serving Melkor, the former Veronica faction children, Riarda had excluded right from the start, the lay nobles who weren't supposed to be considered as archducal retainers at all, and those who had given negative responses to the probing for various personal reasons. I was aware that very few children had wanted to serve as my retainer back when I was unknown. It was unknown when or even if I would ever wake up. Some in the playroom hadn't even known I existed until my return. Hartman and Brunhilde were among the few who had waited for me since they were Lias Gang nobles and had seen my debut and my previous work in the playroom. The younger students who had met me had outright refused to enter my service when probed about the idea, so it had ultimately been decided that I would receive only older students at first. Any of the retainers I could pick on my own were when I needed more. However, to tell the truth, I would have very much appreciated them leaving a few younger students to serve me as well. As the younger brother of one of your current retainers, it is clear that Theodore is not of the former Veronica faction, Ferdinand said. This can be resolved simply if you continue to use him after graduating from the Royal Academy. This is only a problem in the first place because you brought up some nonsense about temporary retainership. Theodore said that he wants to follow in his father's footsteps, serving Gebe Kernberger as a knight and supporting his province, I said. I wish to support that dream, and for that reason I refuse to take him as my retainer and use him for life. I understood that I was being a pain here, but I wanted to respect Theodore's plans for his future. I certainly didn't want to be the one to crush them. Even during the Traga incident, Riarda said to me that she would be fine with anyone, no matter their goals or motivations, as long as they do their job and serve me properly, I continued. Assuming that Theodore treats me as a guard knight should at the Royal Academy, I will not have any issues with him. This will prove less problematic than hurrying to take someone else who ultimately does not fit the role and needs to be relieved of duty. It didn't seem wise to pick based on lineage alone and risk ending up with another Tragot. I was fine with anyone who would at the very least serve me faithfully throughout my remaining time at the Royal Academy. Ferdinand and I were locked in a fierce staring match for a short while until Sylvester interrupted us while stroking his chin. Enough with the glares, you two. You both have a point. Ferdinand isn't wrong to say that you need to raise retainers for the future, Rosemine, but you're also right that you don't have many options right now. The adults and older kids understood the magnitude of what you've accomplished, but the younger ones are just going to see you as some tiny kid. But He crossed his arms and put on a serious face. Getting someone to serve you just for the Royal Academy, huh? Because, after she graduates the Royal Academy, she's going to have Angelica, Cornelius, Lenore, Hartmut, Clarissa, Feline, Roderick. Probably at least most of those. At least Hartmut and Clarissa, definitely. Feline and probably Roderick. And Roderick, definitely, because of a name-sworn thing. I'm not sure about Cornelius and Lenore. But, yeah, she's going to have a ton of options once she graduates. All she needs are people that she temporarily needs at the Royal Academy. So, this probably would work out. Ferdinand grimaced even harder than usual. Ob Ehrenfest, do not tell me you plan to give her your permission. This is a lot more acceptable than her other plan to share retainers with Melkor, Sylvester replied. Am I wrong? Having one retainer serve two people at once would inevitably lead to those two people being compared, which was apparently far too dangerous for Melkor. That said, Archduke candidates and Gebes are different. They can't really be compared, and Gebe Kernberger would only benefit from getting a guard knight trained by Rosemine in the Royal Academy. He's been concerned about how weak his connection to Rosemine is compared to Gebe Groschel and Haldensale. Even if other Gebes started offering up their children for temporary retainership in the hope of establishing connections with the Archducal family, it was up to us to accept them or not. Sylvester thereby concluded that temporary retainership wouldn't prove much of a problem at all. However, if you treat a temporary retainer exactly as you would a normal retainer, someone is bound to take issue, Sylvester continued. You need to handle your retainers well, Rosemine, or you can expect great trouble down the line. I nodded my understanding. Right, Sylvester said. I'll speak with Gebe Kernberger then. Sylvester was on my side now, but Ferdinand still appeared to be dissatisfied. I have other concerns as well, he said. Female retainers resign after getting married. So you must focus on hiring women who will return to work after their children grow old enough to enter the Royal Academy, as Arley did. You're going to be staying here in Ehrenfest as the Archduke's first wife, after all. Female Archduke candidates were generally either married to Archduke candidates from other duchies or to archnobles from their own. If an archducal family became too small, they could also have a groom marry into their duchy, but this was such a common cause of war and conflict that it almost never happened. Retainers who decided not to follow their lady after she was married into another duchy were relieved of duty. A lady's retainers were also relieved of duty when she married an archnoble and thereby ceased to be a member of the archducal family. I was going to be a first wife, of course, so my retainers would stay in my service. I intended to do some searching before my graduation, but adult women returning to work cannot serve as retainers in the Royal Academy, I said, and in truth, at the moment, I am simply not in need of one. That certainly is correct, Ferdinand said, nodding in agreement. Also, pretty much all the adult women I know are in the Love Stories Author Association, and I don't want to break their holy order just to get a new retainer. Besides, books are way more important. Sylvester and Gieb Kernberger ended up discussing my retainer situation, and it was decided that Theodore would serve me only while I attended the World Academy, on the condition that the Gutenbergs were sent to Kernberger next year. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That is completely fine. Anyway, I'll get to work on everything, and I'll see you guys in the next one.